I'm a professor, and when I speak with other professors, I wonder what it is that we all think we're doing. When we imagine what we do and why it matters and what we hope to see being born from our work, what is it that we see? Do we see statistics? Do we hope that 70% of the students that we graduate end up in jobs with $50,000 a year? Do we assess ourselves according to the number of conferences that we attend or the papers that we publish? Do we use such numbers and quantifications to motivate ourselves for the work that we do? If you're like me, as a professor, what matters to me is my students. When I imagine what it is that I do and why I do it, I see that high school student who visits campus and who sits in on my class on Dante and in front of 20 to 30 juniors and seniors in college raises her hand because she cares and asks, why can't Dante just go to be with God? Why must he ascend to purgatory? Why must he go through that suffering in order to be purged of his sins? And the question matters, and the answer matters, and what I'm doing in the classroom feels as though it matters. With students like this and others who are like her, I get to share my love of County Cullen and Emily Dickinson, of Dante, of Chesterton, of all of those writers who helped answer questions like this that meant something to me and that have helped form and shape me into who I am. We get to dine together not as friends in a loose sense in which I go into the classroom before them and we get to chit-chat about their latest love relationship or the gossip on campus. No, it's more like what C.S. Lewis talks about. And of course, he's drawing from an Aristotelian idea of friendship, in which we're both loving the same thing. We're both walking in the same direction, standing side by side. We're not looking at each other. We're not just self-absorbed. Instead, we're seeing something together, and we're walking towards it together. When I see that same student walk across the stage as I'm sitting there in my velvet robe that's oversized and I'm tuning out most of the names as they're monotonously called out, I stop and my ears perk up when I hear hers and I see her walk across the stage to receive her diploma. And I clap and I say a quiet prayer over her future. And do you know what I'm wanting for her? I'm not wanting that she thrives in this economy. I'm not wanting that she becomes a cog in this machine and that she does her part in society. None of those phrases mean anything to me. What I'm hoping is that she makes beautiful things with her life, that she plants gardens and that she bears children, that she puts art on her walls and that she reads poetry at night with her husband. I'm hoping that she flourishes in her work, that all of her great talents are being used for the needs of the world, and that she feels part of a larger story than herself. I'm hoping that I helped her find that part in the story. I think we've failed as professors over the past few decades because we are not able to see what it is that we're doing and why it matters. We use phrases like general education or core curriculum about what is required at our universities, and we see them as boxes to be checked. But what they actually are is the inculcation of tradition, what the Greeks called paideia. In the opening of the Lord of the Rings film, Galadriel begins by saying, "Those things which ought not to have been lost were forgotten." The part of a humanities professor is to teach those things that ought never to have been lost so that they will not be forgotten. It's what the Romans called the studia humanitas, those studies of what it means to be a human being. We now call them the liberal arts. They are the arts for freedom. In a world that is bound and enslaved by social media, advertising, a world that makes them into consumers, that makes them into voters, that does anything but sees them as full human beings, the liberal arts reminds them that they are human and that there is more to life. At Christian institutions, we truncate general education and then we lose our mission. Those two things go together. In the study of history, we are countering the culture's fallacy of presentism. We are opening students' eyes up to a world that is beyond themselves. We are in literature, always showing students that they are part of a story, that God is the author, that God is the Word. We need this in order to really secure our Christian mission, to really follow through on the things that God has called us to. I could go through all the different liberal arts and do the same thing. Philosophy, we teach them the love of wisdom. Politics, we teach them about power and how to steward their power for the powerless. If we look at the sciences and mathematics, we're teaching them the patterns in the world, the beauty of creation, the order of His majesty. We only begin to doubt the purpose of our discipline when we entrust the assessment of our discipline to other disciplines outside of it. Not that those other disciplines are less valuable, but they are less applicable. We don't need the social sciences to tell us whether the study of humanities is really necessary. We, in fact, have to look within our own discipline to justify it. We have to look at the narratives. We have to assess how much we have helped students become more human, how much we have helped them become more like Christ through the history, the philosophy, the literature, the sciences we have taught them. Those goods come first, and when we place them second under the criteria of use or relevance or success in the world, we end up losing both of them. Again, not that humanities can't play the use and relevance game, but those use and relevancy actually ask the wrong questions of our disciplines. So students who major in the humanities and do better in the economy, that might be a point we could make. That might be a way that we could play the game. We could show that they're better at creativity and critical thinking, though I think that's a completely nebulous term. But at the same time, what are we really doing? When we're facing the crisis in the liberal arts, but we are turning outside of the liberal arts in order to justify why the liberal arts matter, we're in a sense already losing our ground. Yes, our students can think and they can write and they can express and they can communicate. But how much are these skills-based rhetoric arguments actually helping us? This is a point that Eric Adler makes in his book, The Battle of the Classics. If we play the utilitarian game, we are already validating their game on their terms, and we're not really validating our own disciplines. What matters to us is what students embody when they leave our classes. I'm not saying that liberal arts can make everyone a better person, but I do believe that they can bolster and support students who are pious and who desire piety, that they can help students participate in sanctification, that they can aid students in being able to see and craft a like-minded community of those who desire the true and the good and the beautiful, that this kind of body politic is necessary for students to thrive, for all people to thrive. When we look back only 100 years and we see J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and Dorothy Sayers, what kind of education did they have? What made them who they were? They were well-versed in things like Beowulf, the Wagner operas, understanding the Punic Wars. They knew history, they knew Latin, they knew Greek, and we've lost all of these things. Do we really think we're going to be able to overturn the tide by cutting more of these great programs? Do we think we're going to be able to create new C.S. Lewis's and new Tolkien's and new Sayers the more that we actually cut the languages and the stories from these students' understanding? I think we must fight back against the shrinking of the liberal arts, and we will look strange to the world when we do so. It's going to appear impractical. It's going to appear wild and crazy during these economic crisis times. And yet Jesus never called us to be sensible and worldly. In fact, quite the opposite. If you remember the scene right before the crucifixion in which Mary breaks open the perfume and pours it over his feet. And the disciple who is going to betray him calls it wasteful. But Jesus says, this is a beautiful good that she has done. And wherever my name is proclaimed, this act will be told as well. In this sense, he's giving us not just permission, but he's asking us to follow her example, to do beautiful things that cost, in the words of T.S. Eliot, not less than everything. We have to be willing to suffer the cost if this is going to be our mission. If we're going to be Christian institutions of higher education, we have to know what it means to give students the resources to help God's kingdom flourish. If we truly believe that it will not detract from the kingdom to cut these programs, then we can go ahead. But if we believe it does nothing but contribute and encourage the promotion of God's kingdom to teach the liberal arts, then we must be willing to suffer the cost, and also to see the beauty that comes from doing so, from being faithful. I hope we can all be as faithful as He's called us to be.